Hi, I'm the daughter they forgot, the one who was told, "You're a failure," while my sister got $900,000, a luxury car, and a standing ovation. They said I wasn't worth investing in, just a warning sign of what not to become. So I vanished. No calls, no birthdays, no, "I miss you." Until one day she walked through my office doors, in that same car, resume shaking in her hand. But what broke her wasn't my silence. It was what she saw behind it. They say you always remember the moment your family tells you who you really are. For me, it was a Saturday in June. Hot, muggy, and thick with the kind of southern tension no sweet tea could cut. My parents' living room smelled of lilies, champagne, and baked ham. Everyone was dressed up like it was Easter Sunday, even though it was just a casual engagement dinner. Their words, not mine. Colleen stood in the center, glowing in that way only favored daughters do. She had that shiny confidence you get when life hands you things without asking. Her fiancé, Grant, was glued to her side, a glass of Prosecco in one hand and his other tucked just a little too tightly around her waist. Everyone was fussing over her. My mother flitting from guest to guest, my father barking out jokes, laughing loudest at his own. I sat quietly near the back, sipping from a sweating glass of iced tea, already watered down and bland. No one noticed me. No one ever really did. "Before we cut the cake," my father said, tapping a butter knife against his wine glass, "I've got an announcement." The room hushed like church. Even the baby stopped babbling. My father turned toward Colleen and Grant, smiling with the pride of a man who believes money can rewrite history. "Your mother and I are giving you $900,000 to put toward your new life. Wedding, house, whatever you need." Gasps, cheers, a few scattered, "Oh my God." I didn't move, just sat there, blinking. My jaw tightened so hard I thought I'd hear something snap. "And that's not all," he added, like some late-night infomercial pitchman. "We wanted you to have a little something to get around in style." Colleen squealed, that high-pitched sound she always made when she was about to be given something expensive. He reached into his pocket and held up a gleaming key fob. A BMW logo flashed under the chandelier light. "Daddy, no way!" Colleen clapped her hands like a pageant queen. "You got me the 8 Series? Custom interior just like you wanted," my mom chimed in, her voice sugar-slick. I looked down at my lap. The tablecloth had a small coffee stain near the edge. I focused on that, counted the frayed threads, anything to keep my face from betraying what was going on inside me. And just when I thought I could survive the moment without drawing attention, my father turned toward me. "You know," he said, casual as a man talking about the weather, "we've done a lot for you too, Shanda. But there's only so many chances we can give. At some point, you either make something of yourself, or you admit you're a failure." People laughed awkwardly, like they weren't sure if it was a joke or not. My mother reached out, touched my shoulder. "Don't take it personally, honey. He doesn't mean it like that." But he did, and so did she, in her silence. I smiled, just enough to pretend I didn't care, nodded like it rolled right off me. But inside, my chest burned. Not from shame, from recognition. That was the moment I knew deep in my marrow. I was never going to be seen in this family for anything but my shortcomings. Colleen walked past me as everyone gathered around the cake. She dangled the keys in front of my face like a child showing off a trophy. "Cute, right? You could probably use a ride sometime. I'll give you a lift if you're ever, between jobs." She meant it as a joke, I think. That was always her game. Say something cruel with a smile, then pretend you were too sensitive when it landed. I left early. No one noticed. The sun was already setting by the time I pulled into the cracked parking lot of my apartment complex. I stepped into my one-bedroom unit. No granite countertops, no valet parking, no handouts. Just silence. The kind that didn't judge, didn't pity, didn't expect anything. I stood by the window, looking out over the streetlights and the rusted mailbox bank. My reflection hovered in the glass. Tired eyes, no makeup, the faint crease of old tears dried somewhere between the car ride and now. Maybe I am a failure, I whispered. Then I looked at myself harder, not with shame, with clarity. Or maybe they just can't see me yet. Phone rang just past 6 the next morning. The sky outside was still gray, streaks of early light slipping between the blinds, slicing across the floor like tired memories. I was curled up on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket I'd cried into last night, still wearing yesterday's clothes. My mouth was dry, my body sore from a sleep that wasn't rest. I let the phone ring twice. Then again, I almost didn't answer when I saw her name flash across the screen. Mom. That word hit different now. I took a slow breath and picked it up. Hello? Shanda, sweetheart. Her voice was soft, like she thought lowering her tone could undo what had been said. I didn't say anything. I know yesterday was uncomfortable. Your father, well, he shouldn't have said that. But you know how he gets. He didn't mean it the way it sounded. I could practically hear her stirring cream into coffee, acting like this was just some mild misunderstanding. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice even. He called me a failure, in front of a room full of people. I don't think there's a way it sounded to misinterpret there. She sighed. Not out of guilt. Out of inconvenience. I know. But your sister's day was such a big deal. We didn't want any drama. There it was. Colleen's day. That phrase again. Her wedding, her car, her shine. The rest of us were just props. Then she got to the real reason she called. Anyway, listen, we're having a small dinner Friday night. Just the immediate family and Grant's parents. We're going over some of the final wedding plans and Colleen really wants to show off the car. It would mean a lot to us if you came. I blinked, stunned. You want me there to watch her flaunt the car you gave her? I said. No, honey, it's not like that. It's just appearances. People ask where you are, and you're still part of the family. Still part of the family. When it's convenient. When it looks bad if I'm not in the photo. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, my bare feet cold against the cracked tile. She said I was a failure too, Mom. You didn't say a word then either. There was a pause on the other end, like she wasn't ready for me to push back. Oh, come on, came another voice in the background, sharp, cutting. Don't beg her. She doesn't belong here. She's not part of this. Colleen. She wasn't even trying to hide it. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Something inside me cracked, but not in a weak way. More like a frozen lake finally splitting open after too many years of weight pressing down on it. I moved the phone from my ear, stared at it like it had burned me, then slowly put it back. Mom? She didn't mean it, honey. Colleen's just... I heard her. Silence. You can tell her I won't be there, I said. In fact, maybe don't expect me to show up at anything for a while. Shanda, don't be like this. You're overreacting. That word again. Overreacting, like my whole life was a performance I was failing to underplay. I gotta go, I said, already ending the call. She was still talking when I pulled the phone away from my ear. I didn't listen to the rest. I set it on the kitchen table, face down. The silence in the apartment felt different this time, less lonely, more deliberate. I stood there for a long time, staring at the chipped corner of the table where I once tried to sand down a splinter. The light had shifted now, brighter, more golden. Morning was fully here, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sorry. That was the last time I would let them humiliate me. But walking away from your own family is never as clean as hanging up a phone. Sure, in that moment it felt final, like a slammed door, like I'd crossed some invisible line that couldn't be uncrossed. But the truth? The days that followed didn't feel like freedom. Not at first. They felt like quiet. Not the kind you enjoy on a Sunday morning with coffee and jazz playing low. No, this quiet had weight. It clung to my apartment walls like humidity, making everything feel damp with memories. No texts, no voicemails, not a single "Are you okay?" from my mother. Not even a vague "thinking of you" from my father, though that would have been out of character anyway. I think part of me expected someone, anyone, to call just to say, "We messed up." But no one did. So I didn't call either. I didn't reach out, didn't respond. When invitations showed up on Facebook for Colleen's bridal shower or bachelorette weekend in Austin, I clicked ignore without hesitation. It was easier than I thought it'd be. In that silence, I found space I didn't know I needed. Mornings started to stretch. I'd wake up, pull the blinds halfway open, and sit at the little table by the window with my chipped coffee mug and notebook. I started writing again. Not just journaling, but ideas. Little sketches of business concepts I'd shoved in drawers for years. A logo I once doodled in a college notebook. Notes about things I knew how to do, and how I might turn that into something that belonged to me. Only me. Some mornings I'd go for a walk in the neighborhood just to think. No headphones. No distractions. Just the sound of my footsteps and that quiet voice in my head that had been drowned out by decades of trying to earn my parents' approval. About 3 weeks into this stillness, I got a message on my phone from my cousin Kelsey. It was a photo. I opened it, expecting maybe a meme or an old family throwback, but no. It was from last night's Sunday dinner. The one I wasn't invited to, of course. The photo showed everyone gathered outside my parents' house. Bright smiles, wine glasses in hand, the men in polos and jeans. The women dressed up just enough for it to feel like a staged event. Right in the middle of the photo, Colleen stood in front of her BMW, arms thrown wide like a game show model. Everyone was looking at her like she was the sun. And then I saw it, written in red lipstick across her windshield. Golden Girl. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe Kelsey hadn't realized what she'd sent me, but the message was clear and cruel. Golden Girl. I wasn't just being excluded. I'd been erased. That picture said it all. Who was celebrated? Who mattered? Who didn't? I didn't respond to the message. I turned my phone over and walked to the kitchen, poured the rest of the lukewarm coffee down the drain. And I didn't cry. Not this time. That photo didn't break me. It clarified everything. They were never going to see me. Not unless I was useful to Colleen. Not unless it helped them shine. That night, I sat at my desk with a fresh page in my notebook. I started outlining a plan, simple at first, a few bullet points about what I knew, what I could offer, a name, a logo. I traced it out with a black pen, letting each line steady my breath. It didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be mine. By midnight, the logo was finished. I underlined it twice, closed the notebook, and leaned back in my chair. I could still hear the echo of my father's voice calling me a failure. But now, it didn't sting the same. It was just noise. If they won't give me a place in their legacy, I whispered, I'll build my own. Because warnings can either break you or prepare you. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about people trying to knock you down. They rarely show up with a battering ram. No, they chip away slowly, one crack at a time. It started with a message from Aunt Rachel. Just a casual text after I posted about my small business launch. So proud of you for trying something new, honey. Not everyone's built to succeed the first time. That smiley face at the end. Salt in the wound. Then I heard through Uncle Jerry that my mother had been calling me the one who couldn't even make herself useful. Said it in passing, at a church fundraiser, like she was commenting on the weather. I let it slide. Or at least I told myself I did. I told myself I was too busy to care, building something, staying focused, learning to value my own opinion more than theirs. My apartment was still my base camp, modest, cluttered, but mine. I'd wake early and work late. When I wasn't at the shared office downtown, I was sketching branding ideas or on Zoom with vendors. I was pushing hard, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. But the silence from my family started to feel strategic, like they were watching me from afar, waiting for the moment I'd trip. And when I didn't, they started helping gravity along. The envelope showed up on a Thursday. I remember because I'd just come back from a pitch meeting, my first one that felt like it actually went somewhere. I had takeout in one hand and my keys in the other when I noticed it, lying flat against the threshold. No return address, just my name written in shaky cursive. Inside was a newspaper clipping, Colleen's engagement feature from the local paper. I'd seen it already. It had been shared endlessly in the family group chat I'd been quietly removed from. But this one was different. Her photo, the one of her in the white dress at her engagement shoot, standing next to her fiancé like royalty, had a thick red circle drawn around her face. Below it, scrawled in the same red ink, the disappointment. I froze. My takeout slipped from my hand and landed sideways on the floor. It was the kind of moment where your breath catches and the room seems to lean in on you. It wasn't just passive aggression anymore. This was deliberate, ugly, personal. I stood there for a long minute, just staring at the paper. I turned it over, half expecting something more. An explanation, a name, nothing. A part of me wanted to believe it was a prank, a cruel joke from someone outside the family, but I knew better. The handwriting was familiar. I'd seen that looped D before. Colleen. Not a direct confession, but it didn't have to be. She was the only one who'd gain anything by tearing me down now. The more I grew, the more her spotlight dimmed. And Colleen was raised to believe the world existed to light her up. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I walked to the kitchen, rinsed off the takeout container, and put the rest of the food in the fridge. Then I sat down at my desk and stared at the newspaper clipping for a long while. My stomach was twisting, but not from fear. I felt hunted, and worse, hunted by my own blood. Over the next few days, I became hyper-aware. Every time I walked through the hallway of my building, I scanned for signs someone had been there. I double-checked my car locks, started changing passwords. I was watching my back, even as I pressed forward with work. I told no one. Not yet. People expect you to come undone in these moments, to fall apart, melt down, storm the family home demanding justice. But I'd done all that before, in smaller ways, and it never brought anything but more silence. This time, I let the silence sit. I didn't answer Kelsey's messages. I didn't show up at Colleen's bridal brunch. I didn't return Mom's call when she left a half-hearted voicemail. Just checking in, sweetheart. Instead, I threw myself into building. I met with a designer to develop a product prototype. I secured a small grant for minority women entrepreneurs. I started outlining a website, branding strategy, social media calendar. Each task was like a brick I laid, stacking it between me and the version of myself they tried to keep small. Late one night, I sat down at my desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. I placed the newspaper clipping inside, smooth and flat, and locked the drawer shut. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from fire. If this is a warning, I whispered to the room, then I'll take it as one. But not the way they expect, because warnings can either break you or prepare you. At first, I told myself it would pass. The whisperings, the digs, the silence, all of it. I convinced myself it was better not to react, that somehow they'd get bored, move on, forget about me. I thought silence would be my armor. But I've learned the hard way. When you let a storm rage around you without fighting back, it doesn't weaken, it grows. My company was barely getting off the ground, working mostly from my tiny living room and occasionally renting a desk at one of those co-working offices downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I'd landed 2 small clients, just enough to pay rent and keep the lights on. It felt like oxygen, my own. And yet, no matter how many hours I poured into it, I'd still come home to messages from relatives echoing like small bombs in my inbox. Screenshots of group chats I wasn't included in, yet still talked about. Comments like, "Well, she always was the dramatic one." One relative, someone I hadn't spoken to in a decade, sent a video of Colleen's bridal shower. At the end, someone off-camera giggled, "Thank God Shanda's not here. She'd suck the joy right out of this place." That laugh, it wasn't light-hearted. It was sharp, a blade wrapped in lace. I let it simmer. I had work to do, goals to chase. I could take it. Then, last Sunday morning, just as I sat on the edge of my bed sipping day-old coffee, my phone vibrated. It was a voicemail from my cousin Tiffany. I hadn't listened to her messages in a while. This one started mid-sentence, like she didn't realize she'd dialed. "And Colleen's so glad Shanda's not coming to the engagement brunch. She said it flat out. I don't need her there. I've got the family I want." There was no rage in her voice, no shame, just ease. Like saying I was unnecessary was no different than saying the sky was blue. It shouldn't have hurt anymore. But it did. Later that afternoon, while organizing my receipts and contracts into a neat little stack, I got another call. This time from my father. He rarely called, and when he did, it was almost never for me. I hesitated before answering, thumb hovering over the screen. Curiosity got the best of me. "Hello?" I said, cautiously. There was a pause, a breath, and then his voice, flat and unyielding. "Don't do anything to ruin your sister's big moment." I blinked, unsure if I heard him right. "She deserves this," he continued, as if reading from a script he'd recited 1,000 times. "All the attention, the praise, the celebration. Don't make it about you." "I haven't said a word," I replied, my voice as steady as I could manage. "I haven't even shown up." "That's for the best," he said quickly, as though my absence were a favor to the entire family. It wasn't a warning. It was a judgment. It was confirmation of every fear I'd carried in my chest since childhood, that they believed I was poison, unworthy, someone to be silenced, not included. He didn't ask about my life, my work, my health, nothing. Just the warning. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet, looking around at the apartment I had scraped together piece by piece. I stared at the wall where I'd hung my vision board, tacked up with pushpins and hope. I had built something here, and not one person from my family had ever asked to see it. I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "If even silence is betrayal, then what's left for me to protect?" That night, I cooked a small dinner. Nothing fancy, just salmon and asparagus. I set the table, lit a candle, and sat alone, letting the scent of garlic and rosemary fill the air. For once, I didn't eat in front of the TV. I didn't scroll through old texts. I let myself feel the weight of the loneliness, not as a punishment, but as clarity. They didn't want me at the table, so maybe it was time I stopped looking at theirs and started building my own. But before I could even stand from that meal, another message came in. It was from Judith. She didn't call, just a simple text. "I hope you're not planning anything dramatic for the reception. It's Colleen's day." No hi, no how are you, no acknowledgement of the years we hadn't spoken heart to heart, just a preemptive accusation, as if my very existence was disruptive, as if simply showing up would derail the whole fairy tale they were so desperate to maintain. I replied with nothing. I could have defended myself. I could have asked why they assumed I was a threat. But something inside me shifted. The kind of shift you don't walk back from. The next morning, I got up early, walked to the corner bakery, and bought myself a small pastry. I took my time walking back. The sun had that soft glow only spring mornings in Texas can offer, warm, forgiving. I passed an old man on his porch. He tipped his hat. I smiled back. For a moment, I imagined what it would feel like to be someone else. Someone untouched by the claws of a family that couldn't see past its own mythology. Colleen was their legend. I was the footnote they'd prefer, edited out. And yet here I was, still breathing, still dreaming. By the time I got home, the bakery bag folded in my hand, I already knew what I had to do. I couldn't fix them. I couldn't force their love or earn their pride. But I could remove their hands from the steering wheel of my life. Later that day, while sketching new marketing ideas for a client, my phone buzzed again. It was another group message, this time from a different cousin. They were all congratulating Colleen on landing a local news spot. Her wedding story featured as some aspirational tale of Southern charm meets modern elegance. Such an icon, someone wrote. Wish we all had parents like that, another added. I stared at the screen until the light dimmed. My face wasn't in that story. My name wasn't mentioned. I didn't exist to them unless I disrupted the narrative, and that was the moment I stopped trying to be polite about it. When people tell you who you are over and over, sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, you start to believe them, unless you decide not to. I powered off my phone, walked to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror, and I didn't see a failure. I saw someone they were afraid of, someone who made them uncomfortable simply by not collapsing, someone who wouldn't bow down anymore. The next evening, Arthur called again. This time, I didn't answer. Judith followed with another text. You're still part of this family. Don't be foolish. I smiled, because foolish would be thinking they'd ever seen me at all. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop, wrote an email to a potential investor, attached my business proposal, hit send. Then I walked to the window where the night had started to settle in. My reflection stared back, older, quieter, braver. If they think I'm a threat, I whispered, maybe I should become one. Sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who finally stops asking for permission. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote. I planned. I mapped out every inch of my next steps with the precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. There was a calm that settled in me, not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that emerges after the fire has burned through everything false and left only the truth standing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the prey. Every minute I wasn't on a client call or emailing a lead, I was researching, learning, refining. I skipped dinners, traded Netflix for webinars, and poured what little I had into growing my business from a whisper into a statement. And I did it in silence. No announcements. No posts. No look at me moments. They still thought I was failing. I let them. By late spring, I'd landed a series of meetings with mid-sized firms looking to outsource brand development. Not huge, but enough to stretch my limits and my confidence. I rented a small shared office downtown with chipped tile floors and humming fluorescent lights. It was hardly glamorous, but it was mine. It smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink and possibility. One Tuesday afternoon, while finalizing edits for a pitch deck, a message from a college friend popped up. "Did you see this?" she wrote, followed by a video file. I clicked before thinking. Colleen's bridal shower. They hadn't even pretended to invite me. The video opened with a slow pan of wine glasses, ribbon-covered chairs, and perfectly posed smiles. The kind of event that made people sigh. She has it all. Colleen stood in the center of it all, raising a glass of champagne, beaming with the kind of self-assured glow only someone untouched by consequences can pull off. She clinked her glass gently. "To family," she said, pausing dramatically. "Some of us are born to build a legacy. Others, well," she smirked. "They're just there to remind us what failure looks like." The laughter that followed wasn't awkward. It was familiar, comfortable, expected. I closed the laptop gently, careful not to slam it, though my hands were shaking. The old me might have cried, might have called a friend, tried to explain away the sting. But I'd cried enough tears to fill a small lake already, and none of them had bought me peace. Instead, I stood up, walked to the tiny kitchenette in the back of my shared office, poured a cup of stale coffee, took a breath, and came back to my desk. I opened the final contract sitting in my inbox. A corporate wellness startup, growing fast, funded, serious about brand identity. I reviewed the terms line by line, and when I was sure it was airtight, I signed that signature. It wasn't just ink. It was my counterattack. They toasted to my failure. I raised a pen to my future. The next morning, the sun was already high when I stepped outside my apartment building, balancing a box of printed proposals under one arm. The warm air brushed against my face like a quiet reassurance. I was walking toward something that was mine. Not given, not begged for, not inherited. Built. At the coffee shop near the co-working space, I bumped into Marie, one of the baristas who'd memorized my order weeks ago. "You look different today," she said with a smile. "Do I?" I replied, adjusting the box in my arms. She nodded. "You look like someone who's about to prove something." I chuckled softly. Maybe I am. That day, I closed another deal. And another. The momentum picked up so quickly I barely had time to notice I'd stopped checking my phone for family updates. I hadn't looked at Colleen's wedding site in weeks. I hadn't read a message from Judith or Arthur in even longer. The silence from them, once deafening, now felt like a gift. Until another video found its way to me, this time forwarded by an old coworker who still followed Colleen on social media. It was from Colleen's bachelorette party. Same tone, same smugness. Colleen was in the middle of telling a story about our childhood, except she'd twisted the memory to make herself the savior and me the fool. "She cried for 2 days when I got Student of the Year," she said, holding court. "Mom always said she was sensitive. I say she was just bitter." They laughed, even the bartender. And in that moment, I knew Colleen wasn't just ignoring me. She was feeding off the absence, turning me into a punchline, a cautionary tale. But I didn't rage. I didn't flinch. I just got back to work. Late that night, when the office was quiet and the only sound was the hum of the hallway vending machine, I stood by the window with a printed copy of my latest signed contract in hand. I looked out at the city lights stretching far beyond my little corner. So much bigger than any family table I'd ever been denied a seat at. I opened the office safe I'd recently installed, carefully placed the signed contract inside, and turned the lock. "They'll see soon enough," I whispered, voice steady and calm. "And when they do, it won't be me who trembles." The hum of the city buzzed faintly through my office window as I stood in the stillness, the contract safe locked behind me. My reflection stared back from the glass, steady, certain. That kind of calm doesn't come from being untouched. It comes from surviving the fire and choosing not to scream. Preparation only matters if you're ready to face the storm when it finally hits, and mine came faster than I expected. It started with a graduation invitation. A distant cousin, Teresa's daughter, finishing high school. The card came in the mail, sandwiched between bills and a glossy envelope from a local bank trying to sell me a business credit line. I turned the envelope over slowly, wondering if it was a trap or an olive branch. The truth? I debated it for days. But something in me said, go. Not to make a scene, not to prove a point, just to be present. To walk in, hold my head up, and remind myself that I wasn't the one who needed to hide. The afternoon of the party, Houston heat wrapped around me like a wet cloth. I wore a simple navy dress, no designer tags, no loud colors, just confidence. I pulled up to the rented hall, parked a little away from the crowd, and sat for a moment in the car. Breathing, remembering. Inside, the room buzzed with balloons, barbecue, and family chatter. I spotted old faces I hadn't seen in years, cousins who used to braid my hair, uncles who still grilled ribs like it was a competition, aunts who once whispered prayers into my palms when I was sick. And then, of course, I saw them. Arthur, leaning heavily on his cane, pretending not to notice me. Judith, giving that half smile she reserved for appearances. And Colleen, center stage again, laughing in a circle of people with a mimosa in one hand and her other arm hooked around her fiancé like she owned the whole damn day. I kept to the edge of the crowd, offering a few polite hugs, wishing the graduate well. I wasn't there to reclaim anything, just to observe, breathe, exist on my own terms. But Colleen never missed a chance. It started with a comment during the toast. She clinked her glass, flashing her perfect teeth, and said, "To hard work, because some of us know what it means to actually earn something, and to those of us still living paycheck to paycheck, maybe one day you'll figure it out." The laughter wasn't loud, just enough to make the air shift, just enough to let me know who she meant. I didn't say a word. I didn't even flinch. I smiled gently, nodded once, and made my way to the door. As I passed by the drink table, Judith glanced up from her seat. She didn't speak, just looked at me, blankly. No defense, no shame, just silence. It was all I needed to see. By the time I reached my car, the sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I sat for a few minutes, hands on the wheel, watching the kids run across the lot, the music muffled by the distance. And then I drove home. The next morning, while my coffee brewed, I scrolled through my saved photos until I found the one I needed, the article from the Houston Business Journal. It wasn't flashy, just a clean headline and a firm quote from me. "We're not here to chase attention. We're here to deliver." Underneath, the caption, "Houston startup signs $1 million contract with healthcare tech giant." I saved the image to my phone and quietly dropped it into the family WhatsApp group. No caption, no emoji, just proof. Then I put the phone down and started my day. The silence lasted for hours. At lunchtime, one of my cousins messaged me privately, "Girl, damn, you really did it." Another replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Someone else simply wrote, but the family group stayed quiet, very quiet, until late that night. I was brushing my teeth when the notification popped up. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the message. It was from Colleen. "Enjoy it while it lasts. No punctuation, no heart, no grace." I stared at the screen, the corners of my mouth curling, not into a smile exactly. Something colder, calmer, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking them to see me. I wasn't begging to be believed. I'd stopped trying to squeeze into a legacy that was never built for me in the first place. And if that rattled them, good. Because when people feel their power slipping, they don't retreat quietly. They strike harder, dirtier, and without shame. It didn't take long. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Yvette, one of the few people in our extended family who never picked a side. Her voice was shaky. I was in the middle of reviewing a design proposal with my marketing team when I saw her name flash across my screen. Something told me to step out and answer. "Shanda." Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't be calling you with this, but you need to know." "What happened?" "I was at Colleen's pre-wedding dinner last night. I didn't know she'd do this. I swear." My stomach tensed, but I stayed quiet, listening. "She stood up in the middle of dinner," Yvette continued, "in front of everyone, friends, family, even people from church, and she said you begged for money, that you failed at every business you ever touched, that your company's probably just another pipe dream." I didn't respond immediately. I heard Yvette sniffle. "I left early. I felt sick. I couldn't believe what she was saying. It was cruel, Shanda. Vicious." My fingers curled around the phone, my jaw tight. but still, I didn't speak. She even laughed about the article, said it was probably staged, that you're just trying to look important. I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly. Did anyone say anything? I asked finally. There was a pause. No one stood up. They laughed along. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything. Of course they didn't. I recorded it, she added suddenly. I didn't mean to, I guess I hit the button when I was fiddling with my phone. I didn't even realize until later. Send it, I said calmly. Are you okay? I smiled to myself, though it didn't reach my eyes. I will be. Thanks for telling me, Yvette. The recording came through 20 minutes later. I didn't play it right away. I let it sit in my inbox like a coiled snake. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, dimmed the lights in my apartment, and hit play. Colleen's voice rang out, loud and smug. She's always been like this, desperate for attention. I mean, come on, y'all know the story. Every time she starts something, it crashes. What's this new thing? Oh yeah, a company no one's ever heard of. Please. She begged me for help once, remember? Pathetic. Laughter followed. Then more jabs, more lies. I didn't flinch. I sat through the entire recording, all 7 minutes of it. When it ended, I replayed it. Then I saved it to a folder on my desktop labeled Final Blow. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. 3 days later, we had a family brunch. One of those awkward, semi-obligatory gatherings at my Aunt Regina's house. The kind where store-bought biscuits sat next to homemade grits, and people smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. I arrived right on time. Colleen was already there, of course, glowing in her pre-wedding spotlight, holding court in the corner like the queen of denial. Arthur and Judith sat side by side at the dining table, cups of coffee in hand, speaking little, observing much. I greeted everyone politely, avoided Colleen. Then, after we'd eaten and settled into that post-meal lull, I stood up and said, I'd like to share something. Colleen looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised. Now? Yes, I replied calmly. Now. I connected my phone to the TV. Easy, since I'd called Aunt Regina earlier and asked if I could share a short video I'd made for the younger cousins about entrepreneurship. It wasn't a complete lie. Everyone's attention shifted. I opened the Final Blow folder and hit play. Colleen's voice filled the room. She begged me for help once, remember? Pathetic. Her laughter echoed across the living room, ricocheting off shocked expressions. I didn't look at Colleen. I watched Arthur, watched his face go pale, his jaw clench. Judith looked away almost instantly, her hands folding tightly in her lap. The video ended in silence. Not a breath stirred. Colleen stood up, face flushed. That's out of context. I finally turned toward her. There was no context where that's okay. She scoffed, looked around. You really recorded me? I stayed silent. Arthur spoke then, softly. Did you really say all that, Colleen? She opened her mouth, then closed it. It was a joke. He nodded slowly, the kind of nod that says everything without saying much at all. Judith didn't speak. Her silence, once again, said enough. Colleen's gaze snapped back to me, her voice low but venomous. You'll regret this. I stared at her evenly. No, Colleen. This time it's you who will. The brunch wrapped quickly after that. No one lingered. People avoided eye contact. Arthur left without finishing his coffee. Judith mumbled something about needing to check on a casserole that didn't exist. I helped Regina gather dishes, thanked her for the meal, and walked out into the warm Houston air. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Sometimes you don't need to burn the bridge, you just need to let them cross it, and show them what's on the other side. 6 months later, she drove that shiny car, The one my parents gave her, straight to my company's doors, resume in hand. I watched her from my office window, coffee in one hand, a pen resting between my fingers. Houston's early summer heat was already rippling off the concrete, but Colleen stepped out like it was a runway. The same luxury sedan my parents had once boasted about sat in the visitor parking spot, polished like a trophy. And yet, even from 3 stories up, I could see it. Her hesitation, the deep breath, the slight pause before the door closed behind her. My receptionist, Angela, buzzed me. "There's someone here to see you," she said slowly, her voice carrying a mix of surprise and curiosity. "She didn't have an appointment." "Says her name is Colleen." I could hear the question in her tone even before she whispered, "Isn't that your sister?" I smiled without showing my teeth. "It is. Please send her up." A beat passed. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." I stood up, smoothed the front of my dress, and took a moment to glance around my office. It still amazed me sometimes, how far things had come. Desks filled with people who respected me. Walls lined with framed articles, photos, signed contracts. My name on the door. My name on the building. By the time Colleen stepped in, I was already seated again, calm, composed. She looked different, smaller. Not physically. She was still tall, still poised. But something had shifted. Her energy, her confidence. It was rattled. Her voice cracked slightly when she said, "Hi, Colleen." I nodded. She didn't sit right away. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the sleek furniture, the open floor beyond the glass wall where my staff moved with quiet purpose. "This is impressive," she said. "Thank you." She finally lowered herself into the seat across from me, placing the resume carefully on the edge of my desk. "I heard through the grapevine your company's expanding, that you're hiring." She forced a soft chuckle. "I guess I figured it wouldn't hurt to see if there's something I could contribute." I didn't speak. I let silence do the heavy lifting. Her eyes flicked down to the paper in front of her, then back up to me. "I'm serious. I've got project management experience, event coordination, PR." "You've got a long list of talents," I said, voice even. "I remember." Her cheeks flushed. "Look, Shanda. I know things between us." I raised one hand, palm open. "You don't have to explain. It's not necessary." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Too soon. I picked up the resume, glanced at it, then slowly slid it back across the desk to her without a word. She didn't move, didn't touch it, just stared. Then I said, "Funny, I thought I was the failure." Her face went pale. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence between us was louder than anything either of us could have said. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the paper, gripping it too tight. Then, as if on instinct, she pulled out her phone and turned away slightly, dialing quickly. "Mom?" I heard her whisper. You need to fix this. Now." Her voice cracked. "I don't know what to do." She ended the call without waiting for a response. When she turned back, her expression was brittle. "I shouldn't have come." I shrugged gently. "Maybe not." She stood. "Well, good luck with everything." I didn't say anything. She paused at the door. "You think you're better than us now?" I leaned back in my chair, calm. "No, Colleen. I don't think I'm better. I think I'm free." She left without another word. I sat there a long moment, letting the stillness settle. Outside the office door, the world kept moving, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the hum of printers and whispered collaboration. But inside, it was just me. I opened my drawer and reached for something I hadn't touched in months. It was the old newspaper clipping my mother had once shoved into my hand, the one with my article defaced, red ink circling my face with the words, "The Disappointment," scrawled across the bottom like a scarlet letter. I stared at it one last time. Then I fed it into the shredder. As the blades hummed, turning that moment of humiliation into silent ribbons, I whispered, "Not anymore."